To discuss novel food in the EU, we've assembled an expert panel, and to moderate that panel for us, the Director of Regulatory Solutions at Lawrence Stevens. Please welcome Ricardo Geala. You want a water? Please take your conversations outside, close the door. Please.
So, morning everyone. I'll just wait until the last people to leave the room as they carry on their conversations about cultivation in Germany, which I'm sure from sitting on that, it's still early days, even though the law has just changed. I think probably licensing is only 24 months away from really actually seeing someone grow something in Germany. But Peter's in the audience, maybe he can advise you on that when it comes to Germany. But yeah, look, thanks for joining us today, this morning. We're going to talk about novel foods. It's still very much novel when it comes to CBD in the UK and in Europe and Canada. But I'm pleased to introduce Sita Schubert, a lawyer and investor with many years of experience in pharma and biotech, and been in the cannabis industry since 2016, if I'm not mistaken, and founded the European Medical Cannabis Association in Brussels in 2019, which I'm sure she'll discuss. And to my far left there, Constant Ma, who's joined us all the way from Canada and has trained as a food scientist and has been in the industry for about 15 years. So we're very, very much pleased to have him on the panel. And then myself, as I was introduced, I'm a partner of a law firm, but a director of our regulatory solutions. I've been a lawyer for about 17 now plus years. I've been in the cannabis industry for about 4, and have advised clients in both the medicinal and the CBD and wellness space. Not recreational yet, because the UK is not like Germany, so can't discuss those ones, otherwise I'll get in trouble with the authorities. So, Sita, yes. What's on our plate in Europe when it comes to cannabinoids, or anything?
Well, I think the situation is very, very mixed, and I know the audience is a little bit maybe more recreational, but when I received all the congratulations like weeks ago about the development, I was a little bit astonished because I thought, okay, what for exactly? Sitting here also as an industry representative for the industry is pretty nothing in. So I thought like, wow, okay, there's some associations, they are non-profit, no profit, no loss, no taxes. Okay, this is a way to go, but we will see how it will develop. And also, you know, the budgets of such kind of an association, okay, you can make your easy math. 500 people, let me say 500 euro membership fee, we are at 250,000. So anybody who even run a charity organization, as also I do, 250,000 is not much money if you have also to grow and to have people engaged for the growing, etc. So we will see the development, how this will go. So of course the other option was, okay, is maybe something in the novel food area, or is it the food area? I think we see through Europe that edibles are tolerated. This does not mean that they are legalized, but they are tolerated in several countries. And of course you don't know how things are going on. So, you know, we know that CBD is of course under the focus already of the EFSA. We know that there were about 150 applications, 19 remained. And I'm really not an authority batter, but when you see the movement of EFSA and the time they need to evaluate something, it is pretty painful. We have even probiotics still in evaluation, which we already know since Danone and Nestle that this is something which is favorable for your well-being and your microbiome, and still we do not have an assessment there. So this is why my hope to have for CBD a quick reach is not very optimistic. But I think another situation which is of course developing is the ban of being a narcotic. And I think this is a very interesting approach because it was a political, not a pharmacological decision, we know it all. But if you have food and you have until now the barrier that you cannot mix it with a narcotic, which was okay, everybody understood, but it is now not a narcotic anymore. I think I will be very interested in the legal argumentation of the authorities how to deal with that. Because the Food Administration Authority is presently refused cannabis, of course, due to being a narcotic. Their webpage did not change yet. And of course, the European side on cannabis is very critical. We have still even countries who did not approve medicinal cannabis yet, especially Eastern countries. So this is where we are in discussion with the governments in Romania, etc., to lift that ban. To train them on the situation and also to give them information from other authorities like BfArM. The survey was maybe statistical, not really excellent, but I think it brought a lot of information which maybe one authority can adopt from another authority. The same was also for the Spanish hearing, which is now ongoing, where we commented as well. So there is things which are moving, but it is something what you have to consider to be on a long run. It is nothing which we can solve, I think, in 1 or 2 years.
And I think that's quite interesting from a European perspective in the sense of, I mean, for the audience, and we're both Sita and I European, obviously I'm from the UK, so the continent Europe, not part of the EU. I'm just lucky I've got 2 passports. But anyway, for those that are not part of Europe, novel foods has been around since 1997. So basically, if it's not been in your dietary system since, I think, the 15th of May 1997, if I'm correct, it's seen as novel. So if we got water's not novel, right? This has been in our dietary system forever. In May or February 2019, if I'm not mistaken, Europe or Brussels decided that CBD was novel in its extracted form, not hemp seed oil compressed, but CBD itself was novel, and that's why novel foods is relevant for Europe and the UK, because even though the UK left with Brexit, we adopted the same philosophy. And so basically anything with CBD had to go through your application process, as you said. So in the UK, we basically carbon copied that approach. However, there was a hybrid model. The UK thought that they'd be clever because of Brexit. So whilst we were going through our transitional period, which was back in 2020, what we said was, and I think if I'm not mistaken, around about the 13th of February 2020, the Food Standards Agency in the UK said, look, we adopt the approach by Europe to say that CBD is novel and you have to submit a novel foods application. However, if you're on the market, so basically if you've been selling something that you shouldn't have been selling at that time, you can continue selling, but you've got to submit an application once we open our portal, which was 1st of January 2021. And you've got to submit an application, and you've got to submit that application before the 31st of March 2021. Originally, though, they said they would validate all applications by the 31st of March. They then changed the goalpost because there's someone here in the audience, a client of mine, that was involved in a couple of these applications. They had over 800 applications. And obviously the Food Standards Agency had never dealt with a novel foods application because it was all through EFSA. Yeah. Previously, so they thought, oh darn, we're not going to be able to validate all of these applications. So they changed the goalpost. It's at submission point. So if you'd submitted your applications by the 31st of March 2021, you could continue selling. Then what happened was they said, we're going to have to validate everybody. And we have to be very careful with the language. And I think this is where a lot of our friends from the States and Canada and those that weren't part of the European discussions at the time confuse words with validation and authorization because they're completely different. So validation, and I don't want to bore you guys with, as I'm a lawyer, because no one's paying me for this discussion, so there you go. I usually charge for this, but no, I'm joking. But no, what I don't want to bore you on the legal side of it, but basically validation is a tick box exercise. So basically, have you submitted an application? Does it contain all the relevant parts? Have you submitted all the information, including testing and so on and so forth, and when that data is going to be readily available? If so, that's a valid application. So it's validated. Right, that's as basic as I can get to. Then it goes through the regulator checking it and seeing if it's safe and all the various toxicology data and reviewing it. and then you get authorization. And that's, in Europe, that's the only time that you can sell once you've got authorization. So now that's clear in the mind. In the UK, they said, no, once you're validated, you can carry on selling. And then once we authorize you, great, you can continue. If you're not authorized, then you're off the shelves. That created, one, a hybrid model, but also a monopoly for those that were already selling illicitly, and they shouldn't have been, which meant that investment or other opportunities from the States or Canada couldn't bring in a product where maybe they had the safety data, maybe they already had a product that was selling that had no THC, they could submit an application, but because they hadn't been selling pre-13th February 2020 in the UK, they would have to wait until they were fully authorized, a bit like in Europe. So it created this monopoly, which I had massive arguments with the Food Standards Agency, because I said, that's not your role as a regulator. Your role as a regulator is to ensure that consumers are consuming something that is safe. You shouldn't be creating this infighting between the industry. So where are we now since all of that? In the UK, we've now got a public list of those that are, I would say, a few that have been given that validation. The Food Standards Agency is still saying on their public list, awaiting evidence. I checked this morning just so I gave you a proper idea of how many products on that list. 12,115 products on that list, of which I don't know how many companies, because obviously, as you can imagine, some companies have a variety of SKUs and product lines and so on and so forth. In one way, it's a good thing, I think, and I'm not saying this because I'm a UK lawyer. I was completely against the process, so I just want to make that clear. But in one way, it's been beneficial because at least those businesses can continue selling and earning some money because they've then invested so much money into their product. And the ones that are probably still there are probably the ones that are going to continue still being there for longevity, subject to the regulator giving them that final certification that they're authorized to continue selling, subject to those products being safe. So that's the screenshot of where we are in the UK. And I'd like now to introduce Constant again, because obviously, you know, he's a scientist from the food industry, and he can give us some insight of where Canada is now and maybe the journey that Canada's taken, because fundamentally, us here in Europe and the UK are always looking at Canada and the US saying, you're leap years ahead, but are you when it comes to food?
Just after hearing how you described the UK and the approach that the UK is taking on novel foods, I do draw some similarities, but there are stark contrasts between what the Canadians are doing versus the UK. So, you know, Health Canada, CFIA, they always get a bad rap in Canada because they're always seen as, you know, over-regulation. And in some situations that is correct. But I think that Health Canada and their approach for novel foods or just edibles in general sounds to be probably a very good middle ground to ensuring, really the ultimate goal is the consumer safety, making sure that there's the food products that is out in the marketplace is safe for consumption, there's no contaminants, there's no micro, and that your consistent quality is met for every different batch that you produce. So the approach that Health Canada takes for approving novel foods is that for producers, let's take it from like a producer who's never done edibles before, but they want to. So what they would need to do is they need to establish their food safety program, prerequisites such as your preventative control program, to ensuring that every step of your manufacturing process controls and mitigates the risks to an acceptable level. So that'll be your chemical contaminants, heavy metals, aflatoxins, you name it, to micro levels. And Health Canada doesn't dictate which pharmacopoeia you can use, so there is actually quite a bit wiggle room between different testing standards that might fit better for your product category, if that makes sense. So, for instance, EP pharmacopoeia versus that of USP. EP is quite a bit more stringent in terms of micro requirements. So you'll see a lot of Canadian producers actually choose the less stringent of the pharmacopoeia. When you're registering new products as well, it's actually on the burden of the producers to ensuring that their products is safe. So through your PCPs, once you've done that, then you do your final testing to make sure that it's homogeneous. So your cannabinoids, all that stuff is consistent batch to batch. Once you have that, you just keep it in-house. You don't really need to present it. Then you submit a notice of new cannabis product to Health Canada. Now, this is where we do things a little bit differently, in that Health Canada doesn't technically have to put a rubber stamp on your new product to say that this is approved, now you can sell. They give you a 60-day window of the time that you submit for an NNCP. And then after that 60 days, automatically you can start selling. So it's kind of good in the sense that it leaves the responsibility and the ownership of the safety, the commercialization, and as well as the quality of the product up to the LP and that, licensed producer. And if that licensed producer produces fantastic product, it's consistent, it's also safe, we can pretty much guarantee that it's gonna have no issues down the road. But we're also seeing issues now where people do these NNCPs, they wait to 60 days, they start selling, but then Health Canada comes in because they get a market complaint saying that this product may not be compliant to certain regulations. The most recent issue that came within Canada is the edible extracts. I don't know which one of you guys here are Canadian or not, but basically what happened was in Canada, you're only allowed to have 10 milligrams of THC within your finished product, retail product, whereas these companies kind of found a loophole and classified these as extracts as opposed to edibles. And the extracts requirement is you're allowed to have way more THC within your finished product. So unfortunately, Health Canada stood fast on their determination that these particular products, which are like lozenges, things that typically in the past, when it's not infused with cannabis, is more seen as kind of like over-the-counter, like health products, like cold remedies, that kind of stuff. There's other products in the marketplace as well that was caught with like the mixture of melatonin with cannabinoids. The justification for some LPs saying that melatonin is a stabilizing agent, but really it's an active ingredient. And in the eyes of Health Canada, when you have an active ingredient such as melatonin, you must have a DIN number.
So. Constant, that's quite interesting because obviously, I don't know if the audience has picked up on this, but you've been talking about products that contain THC as food. Edibles, right? Mm-hmm. In the UK and Europe, we've only submitted applications that contain CBD because recreational is not yet legal. Obviously, it is now in Germany. I don't think, and I could be wrong here, maybe, Sitif, just a side question here. How's the European Food Standards Agency going to look at an edible that contains THC? Because that will still have to go through a novel foods application, right?
Yeah, I think for the EFSA it would be an easy one because, of course, the German legislation does not apply for the European regulation. So for them, it will be still, of course, a narcotic and will be seen as that. And I think here the door will be closed very quickly.
But in similar terms, Germany, if it's a food product, follows novel foods. So if it's an edible that's THC, it would still have to have novel foods authorization if it was going to be sold as a food supplement of some sort.
Yes, and I think this is where we have the difficulties. That that we do not have pharmacological arguments, what was put now in place, but political. And of course, EFSA is not listening to political arguments on that way. So we have here now, of course, a disruptive situation with Germany and the European community. This is why the legalization, let me say, is concentrated on clubs and not like a commercial trade business, because then we are still in the Schengen, and which is at the end replicating the single convention work.
Right, and the reason I raise that as a point of discussion, just for food for thought, using novel foods, food for thought for the audience really, is because you have to think about this, because obviously, I don't know who's in the audience, but I'm sure there's entrepreneurs and people that are looking to invest in businesses or maybe continue with their business. Just because Germany's gone recreational doesn't mean that we're full-blown recreational, because again, like all of cannabis, you've got a variety of products that you can create. And I try to read a lot of what's happened in Canada, the good and the bad stuff, because Europe doesn't really like Canada when it comes to cannabis. They've not done some great things, obviously present company excluded. But when it comes to where the recreational market, and this may be something for you just to touch on, we all see the news that everybody's trying to ban smoking generally, and that's tobacco, nicotine, and what that looks like. I've read, and I could be wrong, and you're from Canada, maybe you can explain, that when it comes to recreational cannabis, it's the same thing. A lot of people want to get high, but they don't want to actually smoke something to get high. They want to eat something, right? Or they want to experience another way of getting high. So is that a general trend in Canada as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of restrictions in Canada, and it varies provincial to provincials, what the requirements are and what you are and you aren't allowed. But the general rule is you're not allowed smoking anything inside a building, a public building, and within X number of feet or meters from an entrance. So with that, and there's also that stigma to cannabis that, even though Canada has been full legal for 5-6 years now, like full recreational, there's still that stigma that the Canadians are still trying to overcome. And edibles and even vape products, it's a good alternative where you don't need to have that cannabis smell, the pungent cannabis smell, especially for professionals who like to partake, but they obviously don't want to have any sort of negative, thought process from people exterior if they walk by them and they smell them, right? So yeah, like to your point, I think there is a push towards more edibles now. You're seeing a ton more edibles launching every month. So I think there's a justification for that, and it's because people, more professionals, wouldn't want to, smell like cannabis.
And I think it's a younger generation as well don't associate with smoking. I mean, I'm old enough to remember watching movies where people used to smoke on screen, right? Or even smoke on planes. And that whole culture's gone. And I think that's also changed for, producers. They are also producing something that they know that culturally it fits with their younger generations, right? So, I mean, it obviously feels that Canada, and something that Europe still is far away from, is food products that contain THC, because we're only talking about food products that contain the CBD. So we're still far from that process. And I think you're right. Until it's not seen as a narcotic from the foods perspective, then it's hard to see how that's going to happen any day soon. Yeah. I'm not sure how much time we've got because there's no timer on us. So I could leave some questions now for the audience before I can continue. I might have a few, but if there's any questions from the audience, there's no guys with mics. They've left. We've bored the organisers on food. There we go. They've all left the building.
Do you have an idea of how long this could take to have the first novel food authorization on CBD? We have, for example, some synthetic applications where you have no risk of THC.
Oh, they've returned to the building.
The first ones. And the first Yeah, the first ones, the assessment is expiring this year. So we were really wondering if this year something will come out or it will take longer. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. I think I can take that because for Zürpen, I think this is the complication of the EFSA, because EFSA is not one body but contains several subcommittees. So to bring it through this kind of, let me say, odyssey of bodies, this is why I'm taking, and this is why I mentioned the sample of the probiotics, which is so clear for us for more than 25 years, and still, we are not having valid claims. Also, so many, even big companies, Nestlé supplied a lot of data. So I cannot predict anything. As a good lawyer, I will not tell you, give you any bad promises. No, the situation is still open, and you all know that CBD was meanwhile even under control substance, which then has been stopped, fortunately, because there was also no pharmacological reason for that. So I think the situation is still remains unclear, and we are delivered to the mercy of the authority.
No, okay, I got it. Get out the way, you're taking my job. Let's hear it for Sita.
Sita, thank you. Look at that.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Marijn. I wanted to ask, 2 years ago, or was it 3 years ago, there was a Polish court which decided that hemp leaf extracts are not novel food. This made quite some waves, but unfortunately I haven't heard anything. Is there a reply from the EFSA rebuking it? Or?
Yeah, but hemp is not a problem. Hemp never been a problem. Seed is not a problem. Everything is allowed.
Well, it is a problem in Germany. We have a lot of cases where companies are not allowed to sell because they say there's still novel food in application. It is.
No, but not hemp.
They get the letters.
I can give you later the page of the authority for food, and there's clearly stated that that hemp is not a problem.
But I'm not talking about seed. I'm talking about the leaves and the flowers.
Okay, because
so the Polish case
I don't know if everybody's
get grinded. Mm-hmm.
There was one of the biggest chocolate brands, Ritter Sport, has created a cannabis chocolate, which was, of course, based on hemp. They had the cannabis leaf in front. They made a kind of few batches, but then it disappeared. I don't know why. If it was some kind of admonition, because they said, I don't know, so just theory, but they made some chocolate, which was, of course, with hemp and not with cannabis. So, as one of the biggest chocolate brands, they are not very risk adaptive, so I'm sure that there was some clarification that this is possible. And of course we have hemp oil, we have
I was just going to add to that. So the flower, like in most of European countries and in the UK, when it comes to food, it's a controlled substance. So on that side of things, it's very difficult to say that that's not novel as a food. So I haven't seen the Polish discussion.
From 1997, stated from the EU.
Yeah, okay, look, we've got to be careful. Okay, as I explained right at the beginning, if it's not been in, there was a big case that went before Brussels before 2019 that tried to quash the notion that CBD wasn't novel. Now, I'm not arguing for that or against it. I'm not a scientist. That discussion happened. That discussion actually came from the UK. It was actually the CTA, and I think I've forgotten the European counterpart that put an application or statement to Brussels to say CBD is not novel. It's been in our dietary system, and so on and so forth. Hemp's been around for hundreds, if not thousands, of years, and they lost. I don't know why they lost. I wasn't there. I didn't argue the points, but they lost on a technicality, I believe. I could be wrong. And it was after that they made the announcement that CBD as an extracted form was novel, and if it was going to be contained in food, it had to go through this novel foods process.
All right, I hate to have to cut you off, but we are over time. Let's hear it again for our wonderful panel: Ricardo Giada, Sita Schuberts, Constant Ma. This is the International Cannabis Business Conference, Berlin 2024.